Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're someone who just loves to geek out on how the human mind works, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're unpacking a really specific, universally awkward psychological phenomenon. Okay, picture this. You're at work, or maybe you're out with a friend, and someone looks you right in the eye and says something genuinely nice. Maybe they're like, "Hey, you did an amazing job on that presentation," or "I really love that shirt." But instead of just saying a simple thank you, you feel this sudden physical rush of discomfort. And before you know it, you're blurting out something like, "Oh, thanks, I got it on sale for $4 and honestly, it's really itchy." Sound familiar? Well, if your first instinct is to awkwardly push praise away, you are definitely not alone. We're going to explore the hidden architecture of exactly why we do this. Seriously, we've all been there, right? You enter what we might call compliment panic mode. Someone offers you praise, and immediately you laugh it off, you point out a flaw, or you just feel this bizarre urge to explain to the person why they're completely wrong about you. It feels incredibly uncomfortable. Now, your coworkers or your friends might just think you're being charmingly modest, but neurologically speaking, something entirely different is happening. Psychology actually suggests a much deeper, far more fascinating reason for this panic. Get this. Your brain isn't processing that "good job" as a gift or a reward. It is actually treating those words with the exact same defensive alarm bells as an active physical threat. Crazy, right? Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to map out our diagnostic journey through the 5 psychological defense mechanisms behind this hidden discomfort. We'll be looking at cognitive dissonance, the debt of expectation, insecure attachment, the spotlight effect, and finally, social camouflage. Let's get right into it. Starting us off with the first layer of our diagnostic journey, cognitive dissonance. This one is all about the internal conflict of our own self-image. So, what is really happening in your brain during that awkward moment of praise? Back in the 1950s, a psychologist named Leon Festinger coined a term you've probably heard before, cognitive dissonance. It's basically that mental tension that gets created when new information directly contradicts an established internal belief. See, your brain is a relentless story-making machine. It's constantly trying to make sense of the world by building and maintaining a highly consistent, totally predictable narrative about exactly who you are. So when someone gives you praise that doesn't fit that established narrative, boom, immediate mental friction. Your brain desperately wants to reject this new info because, psychologically, accepting a sudden change in how you view yourself feels incredibly destabilizing. Honestly, it feels like losing a foundational piece of your core identity. Let's put this into perspective. Imagine your internal story operates through a lens where you view yourself as just average or replaceable. Or maybe you actively struggle with feeling like a massive imposter. Then, out of nowhere, your boss pulls you aside and says, "You are absolutely exceptional. We literally couldn't do this without you." When that happens, your mental system basically crashes. It's just a massive mismatch. Your brain actively resists the positive info because it doesn't match your established baseline. It's too discordant. So you end up rejecting the compliment, not because you're trying to be polite, but because you're subconsciously trying to keep your internal identity safe, stable, and consistent. In a weird way, you'd rather be comfortably wrong about yourself than face the jarring reality of actually being exceptional. And that brings us to our second psychological mechanism, the debt of expectation. This is where external praise suddenly morphs into unbearable pressure. For a lot of us, a compliment feels way less like a reward and a whole lot more like a massive, looming debt. This heavily overlaps with imposter syndrome, by the way. Think about the specific feeling of getting a perfect performance review. Your manager is raving about your work, but instead of popping champagne, you walk out of that office with a giant knot of anxiety in your stomach. Why? Because when someone praises your success, your mind doesn't just hear nice, supportive words. Instead, it instantly calculates a new, higher standard that you are now forever obligated to live up to. You feel like you've suddenly been hoisted onto this incredibly high, very precarious pedestal. And when you're standing on a pedestal like that, the terrifying reality is that the only way to go is down. So what do we naturally do when faced with all that pressure? We initiate the lowered bar defense. To relieve that exhausting psychological weight, you subconsciously deflect the praise by eagerly pointing out your own mistakes. If someone praises a project you led, you might instantly reply, "Oh, I had a ton of help. Honestly, my dog basically wrote the third paragraph, and I haven't slept in 3 days." You go to totally ridiculous lengths to actively sabotage your own perceived competence right to their face. But by lowering the bar, you're actually managing their expectations. You're making sure they won't be overly disappointed when you eventually, inevitably, make a mistake down the line. Let's peel back another layer with our third concept, insecure attachment. This defense mechanism goes way back, digging into the deep roots of our past environments. Now, this is a deeply ingrained, highly complex survival tactic. If you grew up or spent your formative years in an environment where your value felt conditional, meaning, you only received attention or affection when you achieved something specific like getting straight A's, your brain learned to become hypervigilant. It adopted this core belief that value must always be aggressively, painfully earned. And because of that pattern recognition, your brain views free praise as highly suspicious. Have you ever found yourself wondering, okay, what do they really want from me after someone gives you a totally simple compliment? That is your insecure attachment talking. Your mind immediately goes to work protecting your energy, questioning their hidden motives, and throwing up walls. It just simply will not let you get comfortable with warmth that you haven't sweat for. Shifting gears a bit, we arrive at our fourth concept, the spotlight effect. This ties right into our social survival strategies and the raw anxiety of being clearly seen. In the psychology world, there's this term called high self-monitoring. It essentially means you possess a hyperactive, honestly exhausting sense of self-awareness. You're just constantly evaluating and adjusting how you're coming across to others in any given room. Well, if you are a chronic overthinker, a compliment acts like a blinding spotlight suddenly hitting you on a pitch-dark stage. Being the center of attention and being truly perceived can feel intensely vulnerable. You might subconsciously feel that if you're known simply for having potential, well, you're safe. You can stay comfortably hidden in the planning phase. But the very second someone praises your actual output, you're on the hook. Deflecting that compliment is just your quick attempt to step out of that blinding spotlight and slip back into the shadows where things are safe and controlled. Which brings us to the fifth and final layer of our defense architecture, social camouflage. This is all about how we interact within our closest social groups. We are talking about pure evolutionary social survival instincts here. Your brain has a deep-seated ancestral fear that if you actually accept praise and boldly acknowledge your own success, you're going to outgrow your environment or become isolated from your tribe. There's actually a cultural phenomenon for this, often called tall poppy syndrome, where the flower that grows higher than the rest is the first one to get cut down. So, to avoid the blade, you employ camouflage. You lean into self-deprecation, you mirror the extreme humility of the people around you, and you heavily downplay your personal worth. Why? Simply to avoid being seen as different or arrogant. Your brain calculates that it's infinitely safer to stay relatable, deeply connected, and blended in with the pack rather than stand out and risk being cast out entirely. Okay, so what does this all mean? We need to talk about decoding your defenses, because understanding these patterns is the real game changer here. I love this thought because it perfectly reframes the entire experience. It's something I really want you to internalize. Your inability to take a compliment, it is not a personal failing. It is not a character flaw, and it definitely doesn't mean you are fundamentally broken. It is just a highly predictable cognitive loop. It's a brilliant, albeit totally exhausting, protective architecture built by a brain that is just trying its absolute hardest to keep you safe. Safe from heavy expectations, safe from social isolation, and safe from disappointment. The moment you realize this is just a mechanism, you can stop fighting yourself. Awareness is literally the first step to breaking the habit. You can look at your own discomfort objectively, take a breath, and realize, hey, it's just my brain doing its job. I want to leave you with this provocative thought to carry with you into the rest of your week. Now that you've seen the blueprint behind the panic, now that you know your mind is simply running outdated protective software, can you try to just sit with the praise the next time it happens? Seriously, don't deflect it. Don't instinctively lower the bar. Just take a pause, recognize that sudden rush of panic for exactly what it is, and allow yourself, even for a split second, to actually be valued. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and pay very close attention to what your brain does the next time someone tells you you've done a great job.